Hello, everybody. We are here today on another episode of Be the Wolf, and we are going to talk about purpose in your business and why it is the key to solving so many problems that business owners have. I am here today with Jonathan Stanley. He is a business owner. He's also written a book. We're going to talk about that later. I would love, Jonathan, for you to tell everybody what it is that you do and give us a little bit of insight into you as the entrepreneur.
Yeah, I have an amazing entrepreneurial journey. Of course, I had lots of great mentors in my life, and I decided to take the leap back in 2006, and I started a company called Audio Connexus. We were a purpose-driven company with a social impact, making a difference in the world. And we created tourism experiences around the globe. It's a business I scaled and grew internationally, and it was sold in 2019. And then I stepped onto the executive team of the acquiring company for 4 years, left the organization to start a new business as a business strategy consultant.
Oh, super exciting. So now you are working with other entrepreneurs on strategy and
Purpose.
some of the things that we're going to talk about here today. So when we talk about purpose, tell me why for you personally, is it important to help business owners really understand the purpose of their business and also maybe their own personal purposes as well?
Yeah, I have a personal purpose, and my personal purpose is I help people connect to purpose so they can wake up every day feeling inspired about making a difference in people's lives. And the purpose journey for a company is really important, specifically because when you know your why, it becomes the guiding North Star of every decision you make. But the challenge we face with defining purpose is a lot of organizations believe if they understand the answer of why they exist, it will make an important impact both internally and externally because they know specifically why they can exist to inspire and motivate others. But the challenge with having a purpose statement is that it really needs to be supported by the foundation of core values as well. So it's about having a purpose, a clear understanding of why you exist. And the second piece to that is what is the aspiring change we want to make in the world? And that's a piece that many entrepreneurs miss. Purpose isn't just about why you exist, but it's the aspirational change you want to make in the world, meaning that what you do from a purpose perspective is making a meaningful difference in the lives of those you serve.
So when we're talking about purpose, it's funny because we get to this age-old question that everybody, like, why am I here?
Sure.
Why am I here? And so when we talk about our business, why is our business here? And a lot of entrepreneurs are still stuck in this rat race of, I just got to make money. I need to have a private jet. I need to have all these things so that I can prove to the world that I'm worthy of existing, probably.
Exactly. And so I would say that profit is nice. It's crucial to operating a business, but I believe it's a short-sighted goal. The research shows that purpose-driven companies that are living that ethos are growing 3 times as faster. They have much more internal employee engagement because people crave authenticity and meaning. The American workforce today is broken. There's a lot of people I speak to every day that are completely disengaged at work. They feel excluded and alone. They feel undervalued. And so purpose and your aspiration of the change you want to make in the world is really the beginning of crafting a company culture that understands their part in that purpose journey and that their work matters. Every single task project and contribution is contributing to something larger than themselves.
When we as entrepreneurs, eventually, if we're starting off small, maybe it's just us and maybe an assistant. And as we grow, that culture is so important, because as you take on more responsibility as an entrepreneur and you grow your business, there needs to be some sort of common thread that holds it all together. And I know everybody out there has worked for the profit-driven entrepreneur who's just works you to the bone, pushes you so far, doesn't care about anything but the money. And I think many, many years ago, you could get away with that more because people sort of held the same job for 40 years. But
Right.
now people don't, the people leave. And so I know that one of the biggest challenges that businesses are facing, especially as they grow, is holding on to key employees that actually really help them grow their business. And a lot of times the turnover rate is so high that you never get anybody in there that's trained really well, that knows the business well, that can actually help you bring things to the next level. Or you're just this person that's fire happy and is gonna like fire everybody because they're not doing it the way you want, instead of having the confidence and the patience to take the time with the employees to train them properly. So by uniting under a set of values and a set of purpose and a purpose, it really does give the employees a reason to wake up in the morning and a reason to show up and do a good job, besides, of course, paying their rent.
Yeah, you bring up a really important point. And, we see this every day. I mean, we don't have to go very far into a Google search and see those companies that are focused inward. And what I mean by that is everything they do in terms of promoting their products and services are about expressing how great they are and
Mm.
why they're the best. But what they're doing by talking about how great they are in this sort of profit-driven mindset is they're eroding trust. Right now, today, 86% of the workforce is currently and actively seeking work that aligns with their values. And the majority of millennials and Gen Z in this demographic shift we're seeing are craving both authenticity and meaning. They're actually researching companies that have a clear purpose. Now, those organizations that have a clear purpose and understand who they serve and why are taking a much different approach to how they focus on great customer experiences. And instead of shouting about how great they are, they take a very different approach using empathy. And they say, we understand you. We exist for you. We care about you. They invite people into their story instead of shouting from the rooftops about how great they are. And you and I have experienced this, in meeting with acquaintances and friends, right? When we get stuck in discussions with friends who are solely focused on themselves, these narcissistic conversationalists, we get turned off, right?
Right.
We want to walk away from the discussion. One of the secrets that these purpose-driven companies have is they have a strong sense of purpose. They want to make an aspirational change in the world. They have values that are aligned with that purpose, and they have a very empathetic approach to creating culture, both with intent and customer experiences that solve real problems.
I think we are definitely entering the age of authenticity. And I think that is so important. They've actually measured emotions, be able to measure the highest frequency of emotion. And the highest frequency of emotion that there is the frequency of authenticity.
Mm.
And so, as I think our younger generations are much more emotionally aware, than the older generations like mine were,
and more direct.
because they know how to process their emotions. They are leaning into that place of authenticity, because when you're holding in your emotions, you're actually being inauthentic.
Right.
And so it's important, I think, for us who understand about the authenticity, about the purpose, to lead the way and show maybe some of the older entrepreneurs the value in it. But before we dive deeper into this, you have your own personal story. You came back, you grew up in an entrepreneurial household, and a lot of entrepreneurs did that and they followed the path of their family. But a lot of entrepreneurs did not. So they didn't have that model. But you, although you ended up in entrepreneurship, you kind of rebelled against
I
running
did.
a business. So let's tell us a little bit about your story and your journey of chasing purpose, really, and becoming the entrepreneur that you are today.
There was a defining moment for me, and we'll talk about that in a moment. It's definitely difficult for me to talk about emotionally, but it's an important story to share. I did have the privilege of growing up in an entrepreneurial family. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My father was an entrepreneur. He exposed me to the business at a very young age. He took me on buying trips. He really sort of exposed me to the business, and we had discussions about me stepping into the family business on several occasions. But as a young, naive 18, 20-year-old, I felt really strongly that I wanted to create my own value. I didn't want to be handed a silver spoon. I didn't want to be the person that stepped into the family business and without having to create my own personal success. And of course, I was trying to find my purpose then in my early 20s. So much so that I left school, put on a backpack, and flew to Cairo to go on this purpose journey. But as I began my career, of course, I became solely focused on the pursuit of money. I thought that my value was directly corresponding to the size of my paycheck. And so as I went through this entrepreneurial journey of figuring out what I wanted to do, I had a very tragic loss. My brother suffered from depression, and I didn't really understand the extent to which it was impacting his life. And he committed suicide. And that really sort of made me step back and really, really reevaluate what was important in life. And my brother made a point of leaving me a message, which was, inspirational, which is, to live authentically and be the person you can be. You can be anyone. Just strive to be, your best self every day. And that really, really impacted me. And I decided that more important than the pursuit of profit was the pursuit of purpose, trying to find meaning and purpose in business, and how I could inspire, lead, and motivate others to share in my journey. And that's really the important part, is sharing in the journey. From a leadership perspective, the number one thing we need to do is get into the mindset of what we can give, not what we can gain. Because when we get into the mindset of giving, amazing things happen, including reciprocity. So giving is so important in all aspects of our life.
Well, and it's interesting because when we talk about giving, there's a lot of people out there who feel like, yeah, sure, I want to give someday when my life is stable. And I think that's one of the things that's so difficult, is finding that place of stability where you can give from your overflow. And why it's so difficult is because we as humans tend to be focused on what we lack. and I don't have this, I don't have that. And so therefore I don't have an overflow. One
Mm.
exercise I do with a lot of my clients when they're spiraling out, I do this exercise. I'm like, what do you have right now? And we're going to start with something that's so obvious that you take it for granted. So I start with, I have air to breathe right now. I have air to breathe right now. Because when you're in a state of worrying about not having enough money, not having enough employees, not having enough clients, you can't skip to this place of being generous and giving. If you're giving from that place, you're trying to give so that you can get something back, and that's not the spirit of giving.
It's not, no.
So we start with, what do I have right now? I have air to breathe right now. I have blood that pumps through my heart, or a heart that pumps my blood right now. I have feet that can take me from one room to another right now. And little by little, you start to be able to see, like, oh, I have tenacity right now. I have the ability to communicate my needs right now. And little by little, you start to feel a little bit more neutral. And then if you continue the exercise, you start to see how much overflow that you do have, because then you start to say, like, wow, I have this fancy office chair right now. And you start to see how much you have. And you can really only give from a genuine place in that way that creates the juicy goodness in the world if you're giving from that place of overflow. And to do that, you have to realize how much that you actually do have.
Yeah. And I would add to that, for me, I was dealing with issues of feeling excluded and alone when my business was acquired. I had spent 13 years of my life building a purpose-driven brand, living our core values, making a meaningful difference in the world. And then to be acquired and then come into an organization that was both product centric and profit driven, it was a very big change for me, both intellectually, rationally, emotionally, all of those things. I felt alone. And what made this worse is right after the acquisition, within a few short months, we were in the middle of a pandemic and our markets collapsed overnight. And of course, I began the process of laying off team members who were a contributing positive force to the goodness we were creating inside of our organization. So the only way to get re-engaged at work was to practice this gratitude mindset. It was a journey of learning where, as you said, I really began to focus on all of those small moments we overlook, but really need to be grateful for. And it takes practice. But as you go through this process of practicing gratitude, you begin to recognize there are many other things to be grateful for. And you can use that.
Well, and the other place, one of the big reasons it's like come into neutral before you come to gratitude for
Right.
the very few people out there who know how to drive a stick shift. You have to go through neutral before you switch to a higher gear, or you grind
Right.
gears. So it's a similar thing. But the reason why it's so important to get at least to that place of neutrality when you're running a business is because we make decisions emotionally.
Yes, we
And
do.
if we are in a place of feeling lack, or feeling like there's not enough, or there's something wrong, or that the profits aren't high enough, the revenue's gone down, if we're in that state of mind, we're going to make decisions that create short-term results, instant gratification, get us out of this feeling of lack right now, instead of those long-term growth oriented things that really help you grow your business. And one of the reasons why your values, your company values, and your company purpose are so important is because they give you that bigger thing to focus on. It's like a lantern, if you will, or a
Yeah,
guiding light, so that you can keep your focus out of that lack mindset and towards that literally growth mindset.
100%. There is a clear difference between organizations that are purpose driven and non-purpose driven organizations. And this isn't a big secret. The research is out there that proves it again and again. Purpose driven companies have more productive employees, much more productive than non-purpose driven companies. They have much higher employee retention rates. They have higher levels of loyalty. The internal net promoter score, which is a metric to measure employee loyalty, is 157% higher at purpose driven companies. There are many tangible benefits of running a purpose driven organization. The problem is most small business owners and CEOs ignore the research. And that's a challenge. When you truly live with purpose, when you're living that ethos, it will be your guiding light. It will carry you through the dips, and it will help you build resilience over time, because we all know that building a business is tough. It's not easy. We've
Mhm.
all been challenged. We've all had setbacks. There's probably a dozen times in my own personal journey where I wanted to quit, but purpose drove me forward. It was really the defining why in terms of the meaningful difference we wanted to make in the world that carried me forward. It's so important. It's not only a guiding light, it's a mission, right?
A lot of people are like, well, sure, I keep the employees and I do all of this and that's fine and that's great. Like I can come up with a purpose to so I can do that. um, but what it does too for your clients and your customers is when people know your why, when they understand your values and they become loyal customers. There is a reason why people would line out for the new iPhone for like ever and ever and ever, and why it became the computer for creatives, because that beginning thing was think different, challenge the status quo. And that was something that a lot of people, particularly artists and creatives, could really get behind. And because of that, that created a brand loyalty that was so strong that it didn't matter if the one iPhone version wasn't as good as the Samsung version. It didn't matter because the loyalty, the message, the thought behind, the reason behind people, why people wanted to buy and participate with that brand was bigger. You look at brands like Patagonia, it's the same thing. Patagonia is not a cheap brand, but people will always buy it, and the company's has so much loyalty for customers because of what they stand for.
And you're making a number of great points. And it's because they're living their purpose.
Yep.
We can have empty purpose statements. I work with companies all the time that post core values, right, on boardroom walls, and they hang them on posters,
Yep.
right? We believe in teamwork, integrity, honesty, and safety. I mean, we can throw core values around all day, but unless you're accountable and living those core values
Yep.
every single day, that you're tying them to performance and recognizing and rewarding employees who are living those values, unless you're living your purpose through actions and deeds, then they're just empty promises. And people are smart, right? They immediately recognize companies that are inauthentic, and you can see it. It's not difficult to identify. So critically important that you live your why through your deeds and actions. And to like Patagonia, their purpose is to save the planet, and they're living their why. The company, as you know, was donated. All of the profits are now being donated to serve opportunities to create a better world and give back to the planet Earth. Apple is a great example of living purpose. You know, when Steve Jobs left the organization because he had a disagreement with the board, he came back to Apple, and in an early video talks about how Apple had lost its way, that they had gotten away from their core value, their core reason for being, which was to enable passionate people to achieve their full potential. And that created, as you mentioned, the Think Different campaign. I can identify with Apple. You can identify with Apple because we're nonconformists, and we fit into their worldview. And so, to your point, you can't be all things to all people, but what you can do is through why and values is begin to look at the people you serve and the worldviews you share. Lululemon is a great example. Lululemon works directly with yoga fitness studios, right? So if you wear Lululemon clothing, you identify with the brand. You're saying, I belong here. And that's what great companies with why and purpose do, is they invite you into their story, and you believe in their beliefs, you share in their values, and you feel like you belong there.
Well, the really funny thing about Lululemon is I've done yoga off and on for 20 years, and the only workout pants that don't go weird on me in every single position in a yoga studio are the Lululemon ones. So there is something to be said there. But I also want to share this story I heard about Steve Jobs, and it speaks to something that as an entrepreneur you need to get rid of, and that is the employee mindset. And there's so many different levels and so many aspects to it, but knowing your purpose and your core values is a part of really being able to stay out of that employee mindset. So in this story, Steve Jobs was in a limo or something with some guy that was showing him the latest Samsung or whatever competitor thing. It was like, oh my God, this iPod, I think it was that long ago, holds all this and does this and this and this and talks about how like great it is, and it's like the best thing ever. And Steve Jobs said, I'm sure it is.
Right.
But he didn't care because he's focused on what he's creating. And what he's creating is to fulfill the purpose of the company. And so as an entrepreneur, when you have your purpose of the company, you are focused on creation. When you're worried about topping everybody else, that is actually sort of the opposite of creation. You're just trying to one up somebody. We've all had those conversations where the guy's like, you say, share a story and they have to one up your story. Well, that doesn't feel good. You don't want to buy something from that person. You want to buy something from somebody who is authentically sharing and creating their products from a place of making an impact.
100%. It's really about making a meaningful difference in the lives you serve. And to your point, we often get caught up in the comparison trap. And I write about this in my book, right? We look at what our competitors are doing. And the problem with getting caught in the comparison trap is we set the benchmark too low. If we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, then we can't create our own value based on our deep understanding of customers' needs, wants, and desires. We shouldn't be focused on what others are doing. We should be focused on how we can curate and create both products and services that meet the needs, wants, and unspoken desires of people who share our worldview, right?
Mhm.
So we need to focus on customer, not what our competitors are doing.
Well, and this another little story in here about the Wright brothers and flying.
All
So
right.
a lot of people don't know that there was another guy, I don't remember his name because I'm not the greatest with names, but there was another guy who received a lot of grant money to try to figure out how to make a plane that would fly. And he was in it for the success, the accolades, and all of the status and prestige that he would get. He wasn't in it for making a vehicle be able to fly,
Right.
allowing humans to be able to fly. But the Wright brothers, they were so dedicated, and their purpose was to create flight. And because of that, that kept them motivated through every single setback. And even though after they had achieved it, the other guy had the opportunity to improve on it, but he didn't want to because he was only in it he wasn't in it for the betterment of the world. He was just in it for himself. So before we dig deeper, though, I think now is a great time to tell, because we are going to dig deeper. I think now is a great time to tell everybody about your book, where they can get it.
Yeah, it's available at all major retailers, and it's also available on Amazon. And the first half of the book really focuses on how to create purpose, values, and meaning in the workplace. When you create meaning inside your organization, you create meaning externally beyond your organization. And I believe as leaders, we have an obligation to give back. So, how I'm different is I specifically talk about how small business owners need to begin thinking about bringing social impact into their strategies. And the second part of the book is a strategic planning process. We've all heard strategic planning is daunting, overwhelming, complex. I distill it down into 8 slides to give both entrepreneurs and their teams clarity, direction, and a clear path forward in 8 slides. And 3 of those slides are focused on what is your purpose, what are your values, and what's the emotional connection you want to evoke in those you serve, which is a big missing piece in terms of how companies are changing the perception of what they do and how they do it by really focusing in on how they can change the emotional landscape of those they serve. So it's about purpose, values, and one of the things you talked about is this emotional connection piece.
So the book is called Purposeful Performance by Jonathan Stanley. Everybody open up your browsers, open up that Amazon app on your phone, type in Purposeful Performance by Jonathan Stanley, and grab
Thank
that
you.
book now. Do it now, because you know that you always forget. Like, you're like, oh yeah, I want that, I'll do it. And of course the links and all of those things will be in the show notes. And of course, I have a free gift out there for you guys, the secrets to growing your business and having fun doing it, with the secrets the business gurus never talk about. Again, open up the browsers, type in bethewolfgift.com and do a Google search or an Amazon search for Purposeful Performance by Jonathan Stanley, and grab those things now. But I want to talk next about core values. So we're talking about the purpose, the higher purpose of the business. And if you've been listening to my podcast for a while, you probably have figured that the evolution of humanity is my personal purpose and my business's purpose. And how I do that is by unleashing the power of you. But when we talk about our core values and living by them, you have to, as an entrepreneur, you have to be an example. You can't just be like, I want all these qualities in my employees, and then be that person that says, do what I say, not as I do. But how does one really distill, if we can figure out a way to do this in a short way, how does one distill their core values? And you have a story about trying to have 10 core values.
That's right.
Point. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, at the time, Tony Hsieh was running Zappos, right? And I'm, a technology nerd. I love to read about what other entrepreneurs are doing. That really inspires me. And I found that Zappos had these 10 core values, and he was really focused on creating a culture of happiness. And I was like, that's me. That's what I want to do, right? So I went about creating 10 core values and hanging the posters on the wall, and I was really proud of it, and engaging with our team in weekly team meeting discussions about how we're living those core values. And over time, the culture was being created with intent, but it wasn't becoming the culture I had envisioned. And so I realized I had failed where Tony Hsieh had succeeded. And I really had to step back and think about, who were we really? And that's the important point, is living with both courage and authenticity, and having, the courage to become vulnerable and have real world and impactful discussions about who you really are and what you truly represent. And what I found through this process is that most core values were created with myself in mind and not the organization. And so I went down the path of self interest, and it didn't work. And so I worked with my leadership team to say, who are we really? What do we represent? And which specific core values are going to be strategic. And it's really important to emphasize this, because core values aren't just about guiding principles. They're about creating strategic intent inside of your organization. What are the values we want to live by? And we distilled them down to 4. And when we distilled them down to 4, some amazing things happened. They represented who we really were. Mm-hmm. Our decisions became easier to make, and productivity levels became higher, because it was much easier to live 4 core values that represented who we really are than live 10 that were designed out of self-interest that didn't really align with what we represented in the marketplace. So as you're going down that core value journey, it's really important to go through that initial brainstorming of really trying to figure out what values are most importantly representing the organization and the strategic intent in terms of culture we want to create through behavior, because these guiding behaviors are going to influence every decision you make.
Right. And when you have the core values, like, these are the reasons why we're doing these things, you have 2 choices, and which is going to lead you into your core values more. And you distilled them down to 4, right?
Yeah, we found that less is more.
Yeah.
And the other piece of that is making sure that your values are aligned with purpose. When you understand your why and your values align, they become much more powerful.
Yeah. So I'm curious what your company values, your 4 company values are now.
Oh, deliver an awesome experience, both internal and external. We embraced inclusivity, which was part of our purpose. Our purpose was really focused on inclusion, mm-hmm. and making sure that everyone felt they belonged. And as important to that, value each voice was a critical part of everything we did. In terms of creating trust, we wanted to build reliability, and those 4 core values really guided everything we did, because the only way you can build trust both internally and externally is being accountable and reliable to the promises you make.
Yeah, for sure. And so For those of you listening, the reason why 4 is a good number from a scientific level
Mhm.
is that the brain can only focus on 3 to 5 things in a given time. So if you're trying to juggle 10 things, it's too much. You're going to probably be able to handle the first 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 things that are the most important to you. Everything else is going to kind of slough off. So 4 is a great number. It's actually the same number I use with my clients to help them figure out their core values. And it's interesting too. I think you and I are aligned, and I think our business model and purpose and all of those things are aligned, yet we have a different framework. So
We
mine,
do.
the evolution of humanity and unleashing the power of you, but my core values for my business are effectiveness, be the wolf, cooperation, and open communication. And so you can just see by the two differences, they're going to create a little different bit of a culture. And both cultures are going to be wonderful, but it's not going to be necessarily the perfect fit for every single person. And so I love when we have these frameworks of core values and purpose, when we're creating the culture that's important to us so that we can create our mission and create wonderful people that we love to work with. When we create just a beautiful culture that makes it fun to go to work and build and create, instead of being in fear, like, oh my God, I didn't meet my quota. Like, when you just create this foundation that it really is about creating. And we think about nature, and we think about the trees and all the harvest that they spend all summer creating so that we can give, so that they can give, and every animal species can enjoy the harvest of the overflow.
Right.
And when you create a culture from that place, I think you just have the foundation to create a magical business.
And there's two ways culture happens. One is chaotically over time because people have diverse opinions and experiences, and they bring that to work with them. There's no guiding principles in place. And inevitably, many of these companies end up with toxic work cultures. The
Yeah.
problem being that one toxic employee can have a destructive force across teams and departments. And so those guiding principles, as you said, make people accountable for both their behaviors and the decisions they're making inside of the organization. So creating culture with intent is far more important than creating a culture that's going to create itself, whether you like it or not.
Right. Right. And it's just like when a parent is trying to tell a kid to do something, but they model something completely different, the kid never listens. The kid never really gets it. So it's that same thing where we have to lead with authenticity. We have to be able to live up to our values. And if you're having trouble with that, obviously you have to be open and vulnerable about it, because that creates that atmosphere of authenticity. But you also have to do the work and work with a coach, work with whoever you need to work with,
Right.
so that you can actually be the model that as entrepreneurs, we are leaders and people look up to us, whether we mean them to or not. So there is that some semblance of responsibility of creating what we want in the world by being what we want in the world.
Yeah, you either lead by example or create mistrust. I
Yeah,
mean, those are the two options. Because as you know, if you don't lead by example, if you don't talk the talk and walk the walk, you're going to erode trust and create resentment. You can't model the behavior you're trying to create unless you emulate it yourself. And you can only do that through action.
absolutely. Absolutely. So when you think about the you that put on that backpack
Yeah,
and went off in search of purpose. So you've been, it's funny because I think we have our purpose all along, right? You started at a very young age looking for purpose, and here you are these years later helping other people find their purpose. And I think I sort of went that same route where I was looking for my own evolution and
right.
eventually helped others to do the same. But when you put on that backpack and you were running around trying to find the purpose, trying to figure out what was right for you, trailblaze your own path, what did you need to know then to maybe save you some chaos?
Oh boy. Yeah. Two things. I I don't think I believed in myself when I put on that backpack and was heading to Cairo. There was definitely self-doubt there in terms of who I was and what I represented. So the first thing I would say back to my former self is believe in yourself. You're going to make mistakes, you're going to hit walls, you're going to fail, and it's okay. You know, success is not permanent and failure is not the end. And I have failed so many times, and it's about picking yourself back up, right? And moving forward and pushing through it, because that's where the learning happens.
Right.
And the second thing I would say to myself is enjoy the ride. So many of us
Yeah.
forget about enjoying the ride. We get so caught up in our inner world, our self, and what we want. And we forget, we work and we work and we work, and we forget to enjoy the ride.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think especially for entrepreneurs, because I mean, it is fun when
It's
you're doing it. Like
fun.
everything, if you get to the place where you can look at it all as an experiment and have that joy and curiosity along the way, it just becomes fun. And if you're creating
Right.
a great culture, that means you're around people who have similar values, similar ideas. So you're around people that are fun to be around. And as entrepreneurs, we get to create that. We get to be the creators of that. So it's, I think, a special, lovely gift. So again, is there anywhere else that people can get in contact with you or get the
Yeah, on
book?
my website, www.simplestrategicplans.com.
Okay. Simplestrategicplans.com.
Yes.
All right. Open up the browsers, everybody. Do it now. You know you'll forget later. So do it now. Simplestrategicplans.com.
.com.
Awesome. And get the book Purposeful Performance by Jonathan Stanley. And again, if you want that gift from me, BeTheWolfGift.com. And thank you so much, Jonathan, for sharing your wisdom with us today. I
It
know.
was so amazing talking to you. I mean, you and I are so aligned. We have very different businesses, but we are so aligned on so many things. So it was so great to talk to you.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I know we could talk for hours. We'll have to continue this conversation offline
Absolutely.
and not torture everybody. Or maybe they want it. I don't know. Drop in the comments or send me a message if
We'll
you
have to
want
do
it.
part two at some point and
Part
talk about
two.
emotions and yeah.
Right. All right. And of course, remember everybody, when you unleash the power of you, humanity evolves. We'll see you next time.